2 signatures. Same man. Same name. Written just 9 days apart. The first is neat and deliberate, the handwriting of a trained soldier, someone accustomed to discipline and control. The second barely resembles writing at all. The letters shake, trail off, and collapse into each other, as if the hand holding the pen could no longer obey the brain behind it. Those 9 days tell you everything you need to know about how far the English crown was willing to go to break a man it feared. Guy Fawkes is one of the most famous names in British history. Every year on the 5th of November, fires burn, effigies crackle in the flames, and children chant rhymes about gunpowder and treason. It's treated as folklore now, almost playful. But the reality behind that name is far darker. The execution of Guy Fawkes was not just meant to kill him. It was designed to erase him. To strip him of dignity, identity, and memory, and scatter what remained of his body so completely that no trace of him could survive. In that sense, it failed spectacularly. On the morning of January 31, 1606, Guy Fawkes stood at the base of a scaffold in Palace Yard, Westminster. Nearly 3 months of imprisonment and torture had reduced him to something barely recognizable. His legs shook beneath him. His arms could no longer lift his own weight. He was so weak that he couldn't climb the ladder to his execution without help from the hangman. Before him, 3 other men had already died that morning. Not quickly. Not cleanly. He watched them hang until they choked, watched them cut down while still breathing, and then watched as executioners sliced them open and burned their organs in front of their eyes. The screams, the smell of blood and fire, the cheers of the crowd. By the time it was his turn, Guy Fawkes knew exactly what was waiting for him. What happened next has been debated for more than 400 years. Did he make one final, calculated act of defiance? Or did his ruined body simply fail him at the last possible moment? Either way, what happened on that scaffold denied the crown the most important part of his punishment. But to understand that final moment, you have to go back. Back to a cellar beneath Parliament. Back to 36 barrels of gunpowder. Back to the night everything unraveled. Just after midnight on November 5, 1605, Sir Thomas Knivet led a small search party into the undercroft of the House of Lords. Lantern light flickered against stone walls and stacked barrels. They were acting on an anonymous letter, a warning sent to a Catholic nobleman, urging him to stay away from Parliament's opening ceremony. The letter spoke of a terrible blow that would destroy the government. Vague. Almost unbelievable. King James I didn't dismiss it. Beneath the very floor where the king, the queen, and the entire government would gather in just a few hours, the searchers found a man sitting calmly among the barrels. He wore a cloak and riding boots. Spurs still clung to his heels. What the barrels held wasn't coal. It was gunpowder. 36 barrels of it. Enough to tear the Palace of Westminster apart and kill everyone inside. In his pockets were slow matches, touchwood, a fuse, and a pocket watch. Everything he needed. When questioned, he gave his name as John Johnson, servant to Thomas Percy. And when asked what he was doing there, he didn't beg. He didn't deny it. He said he wished to blow the Scottish king and all his lords back to Scotland, and that his only regret was being caught before he could finish the job. That calm defiance caught the king's attention. When Guy Fawkes was brought before James, the king questioned him personally. Later, James wrote that he admired the prisoner's courage. His Roman resolution. His refusal to show fear. It's a strange moment in history. A king, expressing respect for the man who had just tried to annihilate him, his family, and his government in a single explosion. That admiration did not last. That same night, Guy Fawkes was taken to the Tower of London. Not just a prison, but a place where the crown extracted truth by force. For 5 days, he said almost nothing. He refused to give names. He refused to explain the full scope of the plot. Interrogators described him as stubborn, possessed, unbreakable. The Crown knew better. 36 barrels of gunpowder didn't appear by accident. There had to be others. And if he wouldn't speak willingly, the king was prepared to make him. On November 6, 1605, King James signed a warrant. A torture warrant. He ordered that gentler tortures be applied first, then harsher ones, step by step, until the truth was extracted. It was a calm, deliberate command. And it marked the beginning of the 9 days that would destroy Guy Fawkes's body forever. The first tortures were meant to weaken him, not destroy him. Heavy iron manacles were fastened around his wrists and lifted high above his head. His arms were stretched upward until his shoulders burned, his feet barely touching the stone floor. His own body weight became the weapon. Every minute pulled at his joints, his spine, his chest. Blood drained from his hands. Muscles cramped and screamed. Hours passed. Then more hours. Then days. And still, Guy Fawkes refused to give them what they wanted. So the Crown moved to the next step. The rack was brought out. It was simple, brutal, and infamous. A wooden frame. Rollers at each end. Ropes tied to wrists and ankles. As the mechanism turned, the ropes tightened, pulling the body longer than it was ever meant to go. The pain didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, beginning in the shoulders and hips, then spreading outward as joints strained and ligaments stretched beyond their limits. With each turn, something gave way. Victims spoke of hearing their own bodies betray them. Joints cracking. Cartilage tearing. Bones slipping from their sockets. The torturer would pause, letting the pain settle deep, then turn the handle again. It could take hours. It could take days. Guy Fawkes endured it for approximately 3. At some point on November 7th, something inside him finally broke. We don't know the exact moment. We don't know which turn of the rack pushed him past the edge. But after 3 days of relentless torture, Guy Fawkes began to speak. First, he gave them his real name. Not John Johnson. Guy Fawkes. Sometimes Guido Fawkes. The name he had used while fighting as a soldier for Catholic Spain. Then, slowly, piece by piece, the rest came out. Not all at once. Not freely. Names emerged gradually, dragged out through pain and exhaustion. Robert Catesby. The architect of the plot. Thomas Winter. John Wright and his brother Christopher. Thomas Percy. Robert Keyes. Thomas Bates. 13 conspirators in total. A confession delivered in fragments, as if each new revelation cost him something he no longer had to spare. What remains today is not just the record of his words, but the physical evidence of what those days did to him. The original confessions still exist. And so do the signatures. The first, dated November 8th, just 1 day after he began talking, is shaky but legible. The hand is tired. Injured. But still capable. 9 days later, on November 17th, the signature collapses. Letters twist and fade. Lines wander across the page. This is not the writing of a nervous man. It is the writing of someone whose hands no longer function properly. You can see the torture. You can measure it. Not in blood or bone, but in the slow destruction of a man's ability to write his own name. While Guy Fawkes was being broken in the tower, the rest of the conspiracy was unraveling. Those not already captured fled north, hoping to raise support, to escape, to salvage something from the ruins of their plan. They never had the chance. Within days, government forces caught up with them in Staffordshire. There was a gunfight. Some of the conspirators were already injured from an accidental explosion the night before. They fought anyway. Robert Catesby was shot and killed. So was Thomas Percy. The Wright brothers died with them. The survivors were captured and sent to the tower to join Guy Fawkes. By late November, 8 conspirators were still alive. They were held separately, unable to speak, unable to plan, unable even to grieve together. The torture had ended. Now there was only waiting. Waiting for a trial whose verdict was already decided. Waiting for a punishment whose cruelty was already written into law. Christmas came and went inside stone walls. The new year arrived. And still they waited. On January 27, 1606, the surviving conspirators were brought to Westminster Hall. The very building they had planned to destroy. The symbolism was deliberate. King James watched from a hidden gallery with his family beside him. The indictment was read. The evidence was presented. Guilty, all of them, of high treason. The sentence followed. Drawn. Hanged. Cut down alive. Disemboweled. Beheaded. Quartered. This was not justice. It was theater. And it was meant to end with Guy Fawkes. The executions were scheduled across 2 days. On January 30th, 4 of the condemned were taken to St. Paul's churchyard. Each was dragged through the streets on a wooden hurdle, jeered at by crowds who had come to watch suffering as entertainment. Each was hanged until choking, cut down while still alive, and then carved open according to the full sentence of the law. Hearts were torn out. Organs burned. Bodies divided. By nightfall, London knew exactly what treason looked like. Guy Fawkes was still alive in his cell that night. He would have known what had happened. Guards talked. The screams carried. For men he had conspired with were gone, torn apart in public. By morning, it would be his turn. There is no record of what he did during those final hours. No prayer written down. No final statement. Only the certainty of what awaited him. The morning of January 31st was bitterly cold. Guy Fawkes, along with Thomas Winter, Ambrose Rookwood, and Robert Keyes, was tied to a hurdle and dragged through London toward Palace Yard, directly outside the Palace of Westminster. The building they had tried to destroy loomed over the scaffold. The message was unmistakable. He was made to watch. Thomas Winter went first. He climbed the ladder, the rope tightened, and he dropped. Not far enough to kill him. He strangled slowly, legs kicking, hands clawing. Then he was cut down, still breathing. The knife followed. The fire followed. The axe followed. Ambrose Rookwood was next. Then Robert Keyes. One after another, the same ritual. By the time the third body was finished, Guy Fawkes had seen exactly what the Crown intended to do to him. When his turn came, he could barely stand. Months of torture had destroyed his strength. His legs shook uncontrollably. His arms, once strong enough to haul barrels of gunpowder, could not lift him. A witness recorded that he was scarcely able to climb the ladder. The hangman had to help him, guiding him upward rung by rung. At the top, the noose was placed around his neck. Below him, the brazier burned. The knives were ready. The crowd waited. And then he dropped. Whether he jumped deliberately or simply fell will never be known. What is known is the result. The fall was hard enough to break his neck instantly. A clean fracture. Death came before strangulation. Before the knife. Before the fire. In that single moment, Guy Fawkes escaped the worst of what had been prepared for him. If it was intentional, it was his final act of defiance. A calculated choice made by a soldier who understood death and knew his only chance to deny his executioners their prize. If it was accidental, then his ruined body failed him in the one way that became a mercy. Either way, the Crown lost something it wanted very badly. The sentence still had to be carried out. His body was cut down and treated as the law required. His head was severed and placed on London Bridge. His body was quartered and sent to the corners of England, displayed as a warning. The punishment was designed to erase him completely. No grave. No marker. No place to remember. It didn't work. That same year, Parliament ordered the 5th of November to be commemorated forever. Bonfires burned. Effigies were lit. Year after year, the image of Guy Fawkes was recreated and destroyed again. Over time, condemnation turned into something else. Memory. Then symbolism. Centuries later, his face would become a mask worn by protesters around the world. The man meant to be obliterated became immortal. And it comes back to those two signatures. One steady. One shattered. Written 9 days apart. Together, they show both who Guy Fawkes was and what absolute power can do to a human body. They show the limits of cruelty. And they show the one thing no scaffold, no torture chamber, and no king could fully control.